The World War I artists produced about 500 pieces, which was quite a bit of artwork. And by the end of the war, there was no Army art collection at that time. The Army really didn't know what to do with this art once they received it. So at that point, they gave all the art over to the Smithsonian, and it remains there to this day at the Smithsonian American History Museum. So unfortunately, I do not have much in the way of World War I art. We've accumulated a few pieces over the years, and you can see that they're very expressive pieces. After World War I, there was no art program between the wars. But when we started working up to enter into World War II, the Army again started thinking about an artist program. So they envisioned a larger program than they had in World War I, with 43 artists, about half civilian and half soldiers. And they selected the best artists of the day. The best artists that came out of the WPA school, and soldier and civilian. That way they figured that they could have a variety of perspectives. So they selected the artists, 43 of them, and they sent them all over the world, in the Pacific and in Europe, in 1943. Now, unfortunately, Congress cut the funding to the program about 3 months into it. So at that point, the soldier artists were reassigned to other units, and the civilian artists were left without a commission. Now, don't worry about them. We're going to get to them in a few minutes. The soldier artists, they continued working. And you can see here, this is a quote from George Biddle. He was one of the artists that was initially selected. He was on the team of people who selected the artists. This is a quote from a memo that he sent to all the artists, and you can see here how broad their mission was. Any subject is in order if as artists you feel that it is part of the war. Battle scenes in the front line, battle landscapes, the dying and the dead, prisoners of war, field hospitals and base hospitals, wrecked habitations and bombing scenes, character sketches of our own troops, of prisoners, of the natives of countries you visit, never official portraits. The tactical implements of war, embarkation and debarkation scenes, the nobility, courage, cowardice, cruelty, boredom of war, all this should form part of a well-rounded picture. Try to omit nothing. Express, if you can, realistically or symbolically, the essence and spirit of war. Now that gives me the shivers every time I read that quote. Their mission was so wide. They were really given an unprecedented degree of freedom. To work in whatever style, whatever medium they wanted. But as I said, the program was cut about 3 months into it. Those soldier artists were reassigned to other duties, but they continued to paint for the most part. This is a scene of Omaha Beach. The artist is Gary Sheehan. After 61 days at the front. This is another one of my favorites, just a sketch of this woebegone guy. I wish we had a sketch of him before the 61 days at the front so we could do a comparison. This one here, Olin Dowes, was an artist who documented the training for the Normandy invasion in England. This is one of my favorites. Edward Reap is, I believe, our last living World War II artist, and he lives in California, and he is, I believe, 93 years old, perhaps 94 by now. Wonderful man. And he traveled all over, mostly in Italy and a little bit in North Africa as well. Here he's depicting a soldier bathing. Here's a quote from him. "Many times I painted and sketched while a battle raged. I was shelled, mortared, and strafed, the last a terrifying experience. At Monte Cassino, the earth trembled, and so did my hand, as I attempted to paint the historic bombing of the magnificent abbey. I joined reconnaissance patrols to seek out the enemy. More willing than knowledgeable, I almost destroyed myself on 2 occasions through my own stupidity. By war's end, I was fairly well trained." So you can see that he's seeking out the front. I spoke to him actually just a couple of months ago on the phone, and those memories are still clear in his head. You know, he can tell you he said, I was so stupid back then. I almost killed myself several times just going straight to the front. But he was so committed to documenting everything that was happening and to getting the action as well. This is a beautiful scene of an Army chapel in a banyan grove in the South Pacific by Howard Cook. Now, those civilian artists, what on earth happened to them? When the program was cut in 1943, the civilian artists, they had been deployed all over the world, but they had no sponsor when the Army cut them. At that point, Life magazine stepped in, and Life magazine already had some artists in the field. So they approached the War Department with an offer to sponsor the civilian artists. So the artists became war correspondents, and they continued to travel with the Army. The Army worked with Life in order to provide their billeting, provide their transportation. And much like the civilian artists, they traveled, they would go on the front line and depict firsthand what they saw. Now, Tom Lee, of course, is the reason why we're all here today. This is one of his most famous works, and probably one of the most famous works in our collection. The full title is Marines Call It That 2,000-Yard Stare, showing the shell-shocked soldier, or Marine rather, at Peleliu. Now, why on earth does the Army own a Marine Corps painting? When Life magazine donated their collection to us in 1960, they donated it under the stipulation that the collection stay together, as it should. So the collection was given to the Army for care, and we take care of it very well for the Marine Corps. We let them in. I joke about the Marines. I joke that we have to have a special security system so that Marines don't come and steal our paintings. But no, we cooperate with them, and we'll loan the paintings to them when they need them for something. I'm not going to speak too much about Tom Lee because Matt Greeley is speaking later on this morning, and he'll go into more detail. Floyd Davis is another artist correspondent for Life magazine, and he is one of my personal favorites. His style is so expressive. This is a depiction of the London Underground in 1943. And this was right after people had, for the most part, stopped living in the underground. And he wrote about this lady in the background, the old lady. She just loved living there, and she refused to move out. So you can imagine how much time he must have spent going around in London and depicting witnessing all these different characters. Was the old lady there at the same time as this soldier? Who knows? But as an artist, he can witness both of those things and then put them together into a painting. Another one by Floyd Davis, and another one that everybody loves, is Bob Hope entertaining the troops somewhere in England. Ogden Pleisner, another war correspondent for Life magazine. This one is one of our only paintings of the Aleutians. I particularly like this one because my two great uncles fought in the 10th Mountain Division, and they were in the Aleutians. This is one of our only paintings of it, and my uncles have photos that look just like this. As well as Life magazine, there were many other private corporations that sponsored artists to go to war during World War II. One of them was Abbott Laboratories, who cooperated with the Surgeon General's office to send artists in to document medical activities in World War II. So another part of our collection, our World War II collection, is the Abbott Collection of Medical Military Art. And they sponsored artists to travel with the Army Medical Corps and document their activities all over the world. Another artist quote by Franklyn Boggs: "I took a lot of pictures and I made notes, such things as when a bandage is on and it starts bleeding through the bandage, what kind of shapes do those make? And you couldn't possibly make up beforehand what kind of shapes they'd make. They're really very unique sometimes. These are the kind of notes I took down, but my finished paintings were not of a scene. My finished paintings were a combination of all sorts of things related to that particular event." So similar to what I was just saying about one person who might be there on one day, one person who might be there on another day. He witnessed them. They're all real things, but he puts them together into one painting. Another one of my favorites. Lawrence Beale Smith was a war correspondent for Abbott Laboratories, and he documented the Normandy invasion. This painting is titled "The Man Without a Gun," and it shows this young medic, and he is just woebegone and exhausted looking. He's probably been awake for 72 hours straight at this point. And he's looking, this painting just captivates me. The look on his face, he's lost his innocence. Manuel Telegian, another Abbott Laboratories artist, documented Army nurse training in Oregon. Franklyn Boggs, the artist whose quote I just read, this is one of his paintings, Night Duty in the South Pacific. Now, he tells a great story in the They Drew Fire documentary about what inspired this particular painting. Now, he came back from being out in the field for a while, and he was going to stay overnight at this hospital. And he's dead on his feet, ready to go to sleep. And he says, "Well, where can I sleep tonight?" And they said, "Well, why don't you just take a bed, one of these unoccupied beds in the patient area?" So he woke up in the middle of the night, and this is what he saw. Through the mosquito netting, it was kind of this greenish glow, and he sees the nurse going around making her night rounds. It just stuck in his head, so he painted it. This is one of my all-time favorites. The artist is Joseph Hirsch, another Abbott Laboratories artist, and he's documenting an Army field hospital that was set up at the site of the fascist pavilion at the 1940 World's Fair. What I love is that they've got these great fascist murals in the background, and they're all crumbling apart. And the soldiers have irreverently taped up their pinup girls over those fascist murals. It's just a wonderful scene. And another example of how an artist can take many interesting things that might be happening and put them together in one piece. We also have a large collection of artwork, World War II artwork that was done for Yank magazine. Now those Yank artists, they were all over the world as well. And many of them were doing the same thing, just documentary artwork, but a lot of them did artwork as well. So we have about 3,000 cartoons and documentary pieces for Yank magazine. Howard Brodie, the rather famous artist, was a correspondent for Yank magazine at that point. He wrote, "I feel the human is more beautiful in proximity to life and death. His emotions are more deeply felt. I've seen men who would take you from behind the lines and give to you on the line. I've seen men give profoundly. Ah, war, for all its negation, there is a beauty there when we're facing life and death. That I've seen and experienced and am thankful for." I don't think you can see that one very well with the lights on here. This is a piece by Howard Brodie documenting just that, soldiers giving on the front line when they're under fire. And of course we have some sad sack cartoons as well as part of our Yank collection. This one I'll give you a moment to enjoy the humor of. The sad sack spends all this time putting together the shower only to have it labeled officers only. Bill Keane was, of course, the artist who painted, or not painted, he drew the family circus for many, many years, and he unfortunately passed away about 1.5 years ago as well. This is one of his World War II cartoons for Yank magazine, and the caption on it is, "I regret that I have one wife to give to my country," as they're sending away the wax. We also have a large poster collection from World War II. Now, World War II is really the shining star of our collection. You can tell I've spent a long time here talking about World War II. But we have a large collection of poster art from World War II as well. This Norman Rockwell painting right here is one of the 4 Norman Rockwells in our collection. And of course it is Let's Give Him Enough and On Time. The photo does not do the painting justice. If you are in the Washington, D.C. area, please give me a call. I'll show you the original. You can't see a brush stroke on this. His brush strokes are so tight. What I think is great about this painting, there's a good story that goes along with it. The Army, of course, commissioned him to do this painting as a recruiting poster, and they sent him the gunner and the gun, and the guy shows up at the studio with this huge gun, and Norman Rockwell says, well, I'd like to make you look like you've been through a battle. And he says, okay, sure, rub dirt on me, rip my shirt. Rockwell ripped his shirt the way you see it there. He said, that's all fine, but my gun is going to be portrayed in sparkling clean shape, as you can see that it is. Another one here, Jeff Schleicher was another well-known poster artist in World War II. This is his Corps of Engineers poster. And we have all the original paintings for these posters, as well as copies of the posters themselves. Ooh. There we go. Now, after World War II, that's when the Army art collection started. After the war, the Army acquired about 3,000 pieces of art, and this time they said, well, we're not giving this to the Smithsonian, we're going to start our own collection. And then it grew very quickly as the Abbott Laboratories donated their collection, and later on Life magazine donated their collection to the Army, and the Yates collection came in as well. So the collection grew very, very quickly. But after World War II, the program was discontinued, and it wasn't continued again during the Korean War. There was a motion that was started to create an artist program during the Korean War, but it really didn't get off the floor at all. So there were a couple artists, one for Life magazine, one for Collier's. Stars and Stripes had an artist as well, but no officially Army-sponsored program during the Korean War. And for that reason, we do not have much artwork associated with the Korean War. This is one of the pieces that we do have. Weldy Bear was a Department of the Army civilian, and he happened to be there. So he documented Korean War activities for the Army. The next time the Army started an artist program was the Vietnam War. And looking back, they realized, well, we didn't really get our act together for the Korean War, but we don't want that to happen again this time. So they envisioned quite an extensive program that was based on the World War II program. So using both soldier artists and civilian artists. The civilian program, they selected some artists, and they sent them to Vietnam on invitational travel orders. So the civilians would spend about 30 days in the field, and then they'd go back to their studio, create some artwork, and donate that to the Army. Now, the soldier artists, there were 10 teams of soldier artists sent to Vietnam, and the teams had about 4 or 5 soldiers on them. Now, this is very different from the World War II art program, because many of the soldiers, as you can imagine, they volunteered to be artists because they thought it was going to be a little bit safer than carrying around a gun. Maybe they were drafted, maybe they were conscientious objectors. We had all of them during Vietnam. So it's a different group of people, and it's a different time period, so we see the style of the art change quite a bit. Roger Blum was a member of our first artist team in Vietnam, and he was a conscientious objector. He says, as a conscientious objector, I carried no weapons but my sketchbook and my faith. Some added other means of communication to their faith. This is one of his works of art from Vietnam. And I think you can see here the style has changed dramatically from what we saw in World War II. This is a watercolor that he did, and it's just a very quick, on-the-spot watercolor drawing. Very expressive. The colors are bright. Many of the artists in Vietnam are starting to work in acrylics rather than in oils, as they did traditionally in World War II. So you see a change in the art because they're using a different medium. Paul Rickert was another member of Roger Blum's team of artists, and he drew this drawing of Roger Blum at work. Now, I love it when our artists draw or paint other artists working, because it's so funny. They're documenting everything that's going on in the war except for the artists who are documenting the war. So anytime we have something like this, it really excites me. So this is Roger Blum working. And you can see that the Vietnamese children were very interested in what was going on as well. Most of the Vietnam artists, they'll tell you, when you talk to them even now, they'll say, everybody was interested in what we were doing. They would be surprised that combat artists were coming. One guy says he was in charge of his team's travel, and he would call up and he would say, well, I have a team of combat artists coming in. Yes, combat artists. Nobody expected them, but they were very supportive of them when they did come in. Brian Clark was a member of the 4th team to go into Vietnam. This is probably a cliche almost Vietnam image, but it's one that everybody relates to. Everybody who fought in Vietnam traveled places by helicopter. So it's a scene that everybody relates to, and even soldiers now. One of the best things about our collection is that soldiers of different generations can all relate to the art. It brings them together through common experiences. Some things are different. The faces change, the enemy changes, the technology changes. But some things about being a soldier never change. You're always going to be traveling somewhere. You're always going to be waiting for something to happen, or doing guard duty, or writing letters home. So there's common threads that tie together generations. Acuna was a member of the 6th artist team, I believe. You can see that he's working in a Cézanne-inspired style. Morning ritual, just depicting day-to-day events. And the Vietnam artists were given the same instructions that the World War I and the World War II artists were given. They were given no instructions in terms of medium. They picked their own medium, they picked their own subject matter. They were just told, document whatever's happening. So something as simple as shaving. This one's one of my favorites. Cheetah gets a bath. And when I first saw this painting, I'm like, well, cheetah, what are they talking about? Where's the cheetah? Well, the artillery piece, its name is Cheetah, and now they're giving it a bath. This is a very beautiful piece here showing the very ephemeral scene showing the point man just out there and exposed. Following the Vietnam War, well, in 1970, the Army decided that they wanted to expand the program beyond Vietnam. There was interest in documenting other geographic areas that the Army was in. So they took the same model of a program, having teams of artists who were soldiers and sending them out. Meanwhile, they also had civilian artists who were interested in the Vietnam program, but they may not have wanted to travel to such a volatile region. So they expanded the program to other geographic areas. So we had artists go to Thailand, Korea, documenting training all over the world as well. Al Sprague was an artist who documented Operation Just Cause in Panama. His quote, "As I watched each soldier approach the open door, I could feel the tension and fear, but that did not stop him from launching himself into the air. The excitement and determination was so palpable that I wished I had on gear so that I could jump too." He's a civilian. And this is the painting that he's talking about. Moment of truth. They're jumping into Panama. Joseph Hindley documented training in Germany in 1972. You can see that he's working in a same very quick watercolor style here. The same model was followed when we entered the Persian Gulf War. We had two teams of artists that were sent to, one to Operation Desert Shield, and then the second team of two artists was sent to Operation Desert Storm. Mario Acevedo was a member of the second team. Most of my paintings are focused on a soldier. The perception was that it was a very technical, automated war. I wanted to make sure people understood the burden was on the soldiers. It's not only artistic work, it's also historical work. It has to stand on its own merits. And this is one of his pieces that he was talking about there. Now the Army and the Marine Corps as well really focus on the people as their assets. The Navy art collection, the Air Force art collection, they tend to be more focused on the technology. You'll see these great paintings of ships or planes. Army and Marine Corps focus on the people. So throughout our collection and the Marine Corps' collection as well, you see a lot of soldier portraits. This guy's a truck driver. Although he does do the technology as well. This is the same artist, the 11th Aviation Brigade in the attack. Desert Storm. This artist, Seeger Hartgers, was there for Up Desert Shield, so this is in the build-up. The chaplain is playing chess, with a patient. So again, they're documenting not only the action, but the day-to-day scenes. Peter Verasano was one of our artists in Desert Storm, and he followed on to become an artist in residence throughout the 1990s as well. This was one of his great portrait here of a 101st Airborne soldier. Don't mess with the 101st. Another one by Verasano. Victory Division soldier on guard at sunset. Now, when those Desert Shield and Desert Storm artists returned from the war, they held an exhibit of their work in the Pentagon area, and it was attended by many high-ranking Pentagon officials, including General Gordon Sullivan, who was the Chief of Staff of the Army at the time. General Sullivan was very supportive of the program, and he was very interested in seeing the program continued in the future. So at his suggestion, the artists impressed him so much that he suggested that they create an artist in residence position for the Center of Military History. So following Desert Storm, we created our artist in residence program, which continues to the present day. The Artist in Residence program is a little bit different than the previous programs. I told you that there were teams of artists in the past. Well, now we only have one. And that has some good points and some bad points. On the plus side, we have an artist at all times. This is an active duty soldier who's ready to deploy. So if something happened today, we could send that artist out tomorrow. And we've done that in the past. In 2010, when the earthquake happened in Haiti, we had an artist on staff at the time, and National Guard went down to distribute supplies, and our artist went down to document that as well. So that's an example of how great it is that we have an artist on staff at all times. But the downside is that we only have one artist at all times. So when you're fighting a war in Iraq and Afghanistan, you can only have one person, you can only have the artist in one place at a time. This is a quote from Jeffrey Manuzak, who was artist in residence in the mid-90s. The way a historian writes about history, we paint. We can make places look hotter, rucksacks bigger, men more tired. We still have to remain historically correct, but we can exaggerate using the elements of art. That's what makes it so different from a photograph. We can tell a story through painting. And we get that question all the time, by the way. Why do you bother with this art program if you can just take pictures? I think the art speaks for itself. I hope that nobody's sitting here wondering why we don't just take photographs. But the artist can really put soul into a piece. And as Manuzak said, he can exaggerate elements to create a certain mood that might not be there in a photograph. This is one of Manuzak's paintings of Road March in Somalia in 1993. Gene Snyder was an artist as well. In 1995, he went to Rwanda, and this is one of his pieces showing a patrol. Sigurd Hartgers was a familiar name to us as he was an artist during Desert Storm. He came back to be an artist in residence in the 1990s as well. And this is one of his pieces from documenting training in Germany, conducting the after-action review, or hot wash. Another one by Gene Snyder showing soldiers on watch in Bosnia. And again, they're given the same instructions. Work in any medium you want, document everything that's happening. So the Army really does stick to that historical precedent in giving the artists the greatest degree of freedom that we can. We'll give them some guidelines. Like our most recent artist, we're sending her to Afghanistan in just a couple months, and the instructions we've given her are, well, just go experience what is there to experience, but we don't have anything in our collection yet with multicam, the new uniform in Afghanistan. So we'd like to see some multicam. If you happen to see dog handlers, we'd like to see some dog handlers. So it's some very, very vague instructions. They're pretty much left to their own devices, which gives them a wide degree of artistic freedom. Henrietta Snowden went to Kosovo, and this is a great picture that watercolor that she painted of a female soldier just up at the crack of dawn. Snowden was also our artist in residence on September 11, 2001. She went over to the Pentagon area, climbed the hill over where the Navy Annex is, and sketched it from all angles. This is the pastel drawing that she finally produced to document the attack on the Pentagon. Now, following that, we have that problem. We're going into Afghanistan and Iraq at the same time, so where are we going to send our artist? At that point, fortunately, we've had some volunteer artists, soldiers all over the place. The Army has a lot of talent, we've found, and it's great when an artist, a soldier artist, will approach us and say, hey, I have an art degree. I paint in my spare time, and I happen to be I'm deploying next month. Do you want some art? And we'll say, well, yeah, we want some art. So LZ Golden happened to be an artist in residence. So he's not a volunteer. He's an artist in residence. And this is a painting of Special Forces soldiers in the Hazara province of Afghanistan in 2003. Another one by LZ Golden, Barracks, Fallujah. Heather Engelhardt was one of those volunteer artists. She is a captain in the Louisiana National Guard, Corps of Engineers, and she happened to be deploying to Iraq in 2004-2005. And she volunteered her services to our collection. So she was over there, her command was okay with giving her time to paint, and she documented virtually everything that they did over there, just because she wanted to do it, and she donated her works to our collection. So that's part of how we get around the problem of having only one artist to send to only one place. We make friends with talented soldiers and beg them to donate their work to us. Another one by Heather Engelhardt, just a beautiful watercolor piece showing the silhouette of this soldier. It's called Big Country. And this slide doesn't do it justice. The colors are amazing. Martin Cervantes was our most recent artist in residence. This painting is based on his 2008 deployment to Afghanistan. He created the painting in 2009. Now it's called Treacherous Corner because you can see, number one, there's a big fall on the right-hand side. But as they're going around that corner, they don't know what they're going to find. So it's treacherous in many, many ways. It's a dangerous situation for them to be in. I also love that this piece shows the mountainous landscape of that part of Afghanistan as well. This is another one that he did based on his deployment to Afghanistan in 2008. And one of the things that I love about this collection, as I said, any soldier can relate to this scene. And in fact, we have another painting that was done in about 1990 by an artist who went to Panama, and it shows the same exact scene. So when he started painting this, I said, oh, that reminds me of that Panama painting. He said, what Panama painting? I said, oh, don't paint over it. I really like it, don't paint over it. So again, it's bringing the generations of soldiers together. Everybody's had this experience, and it's a very unique experience. This one is titled Picture Day in the Village. And what they're doing is they're gathering information on each person. I forget the name of the camera that they're using here, but it's not a normal camera. They get fingerprints, they get all sorts of intelligence data from that camera. And all the children, you could see, they all wanted their picture taken. They were all very excited about it. So that's one thing that he witnessed and documented. This one is titled A Huge Responsibility. Excuse me. This is a first lieutenant in this position here. And I met the guy. He recently came and visited us to see the painting. He had been on the ground in Afghanistan for less than 30 days when this took place. And what he's doing is he's coordinating with the Afghani police chief, and he's working with an interpreter. And they are working on redoing like weapons vaults. Now this is a lot of stuff for a first lieutenant to be coordinating here. So it's titled A Huge Responsibility because this young man has a huge responsibility. I think he told me he was 23 years old at the time. This is the last one that I have to show you today. Another piece just showing the landscape. He called it Dust Devils. The tank is ours, and what we're doing here is we are escorting the Afghani, because at this point we are handing the mission over to the Afghani forces, so we're just providing escort services at this point. But this is another example of how the artist can enhance a scene. If you look at his photographs that he took on this day, you can't see that tank over there. All you can see is these guys and because there's so much dust. But he knew it was there, so he was able to put it into the painting. So I hope that this artwork has spoken for itself and that nobody's sitting here wondering why we don't just send a bunch of photographers. We do that. We have combat camera teams that go over to go into the field in Afghanistan and everywhere that the Army's doing things. But we send the artists as well. We also send historians to take oral histories of soldiers. The Center of Military History does all this stuff. So we have a big mission of documenting the history of the U.S. Army. Yes?
There's a character from the World War II over in Europe that you see all over during the war that nobody's really, I guess, documented, but if you go to the monument in Washington, D.C., you'll see it on the side. Gilroy was here. Do you have any, pictures of that, or?
I don't think we do, actually. No.
You ask any of the soldiers that went over there and they've seen it all over.
Yeah.
Nobody knows who did it.
Yeah.
That's one of the arts that I think should be documented also.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
You've gone through so many paintings.
Yes.
Can you think of one that kept you awake at night, so emotional that you dreamt about it that night?
Personally, I think I'm a little desensitized to it. But yes, there is one painting that always sticks in my mind, and I'm sure Mr. Greeley will show it as well. It's a painting by Tom Lee titled The Price, and it's another Peleliu invasion piece showing this young Marine who half of his body is blown off, and it's just blood and sinew hanging off of him. That one is one that affects me greatly.
Yes? In a lot of our operations, soldiers will paint on walls.
Yes.
Everywhere. Are we doing anything to capture
We are not officially. No. One other thing that the Center of Military History does is we send these combat history, military history detachments out. And it's sort of their job to, figure out what historical is happening over there and bring it back to us. They actually collect artifacts. So sometimes they'll bring back something like that, but they tend to bring back small things rather than sides of buildings. But we do have, it's actually on exhibit in the Pentagon right now. We've got this great exhibit up there in the Pentagon. There's a door to a Humvee that an artist or a soldier had painted on, and it's got a great scene on it. So not documentary as much, but it's a great historical artifact. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you. Yes.
How much of the art do you, ordinarily in any exhibit, you can only exhibit a fraction of what you have.
Yes.
About what percentage do you think you have actually on exhibit at Fort Belvoir? Right?
We do not have a museum at Fort Belvoir. The National Museum of the U.S. Army is in the fundraising stage at this point. So it will be, I think the current projected opening date is 2017. So it's a couple of years down the road. They keep telling us, it's going to open in 2008, 2009, 2010, and it's moving forward, but, the private foundation that's doing the fundraising for it needs to hit a certain number before they can start building and before the Army can take the building from them. So right now it's up in the air, but I am crossing my fingers for 2017. Yes, sir.
Is there any plan to put this in the internet?
Yeah, we have some pieces up on our website. I'd like to do a Facebook page and put a lot of art on that, but I'm just one curator who takes care of all of this, so I'm not quite there yet. But yeah, I think that we're actually revamping our website right now, and there's going to be a lot more art on there than has been in the past, and hopefully it'll be organized a little bit better. So hopefully within the next year we're going to have that new website up and have a better online art collection. Yes, sir.
With the new museum, are you going to get new vaults and storage facilities for your collection, or are they going to stay where they are?
We just built a new storage facility. So our storage facility is at Fort Belvoir. The new museum is going to be at Fort Belvoir, by the way. So we just built a storage facility. It's at Fort Belvoir. It is 180,000 square feet, climate controlled, the whole 9 yards. This is state-of-the-art storage. The Smithsonian, their staff comes over and they are jealous of what we have. So we are, it's a good thing that the Army has done that. And we were so lucky that we built that building a couple of years ago, because we wouldn't have the money to do it now.
Do you have anything at the Army Heritage and Education Center?
Yes, we do. Yes, we do. So they actually just built a new storage facility up there as well. Their collection is more poster-oriented, but we do have artwork up there as well. And they're one of our museums, so we loan to them regularly. Yes, ma'am.
What we're seeing soldiers producing now and other people is digital art. Have you started curating that?
Yes, we have a few digital pieces. They make me nervous because I understand physical paintings much better than I do computer files. So I've had to learn quite a bit about computers in order to curate that collection. But our current artist, the new one who just came in a couple months ago, she's really into doing digital art. So starting with her, we're going to be growing that collection quite a bit, I think. So, yes, ma'am.
In World War I, the artists were asked to paint large paintings that were used as range finders for the artillery.
Yes.
Do you know if any of those have been preserved?
We do not have any, and I don't know of any others being preserved.
It's too bad.
It is too bad. Any other questions? Okay, well, thank you all for listening to me.